Welcome to ClickMyProject. Let's we go to demo of system. The project title is Efficient Algorithm for Mining the Concise and Lossless Representation of High Utility Item Set, which means we find the high utility item using data mining efficient algorithm. Generally, data mining or knowledge discovery is the process of analyzing data from different perspectives. Goal of the mining process is to extract the information from the database or dataset and change into understandable structure for further use. Main process of this paper: find the high utility item set from the number of transactions using utility mining. The utility mining is the one of the task of the data mining. We propose a novel framework of 3 efficient algorithms for mining closed high utility item set. That algorithms are called closed high utility item set discovery and a priori high utility discarding unpromising item and discovery of all high utility algorithms. The main objective of this project is to recover all high utility items from the set of closed high utility items without accessing the original database. So we need to overcome the existing system problem and existing system disadvantages. In this proposed system, first we define the find items in the item set. These items are considered as an internal utility. After initialize the items, we give the profit unit of each item. This profit unit is considered as an external utility. The multiplication of next we go to the item transaction and find the transaction item utility. These utilities find out from the absolute utility. So the absolute utility calculate from the internal and the external utility. So absolute utility is considered as a transaction utility. So all the transaction is considered as the transaction item utility set. So we set the minimum threshold in the transactions. Which transaction is above the minimum threshold, that transaction is considered transaction weighted item utility set. That we have classified that utility sets. Then we go to the high transaction weighted utility item. The demo system is now we start the process. Then we extract the information from the data set. When click the item set data table, we show the 10 finite item set from the database. The item number is defined the index of items and the item ID is a ID of each items. The item name is described here. The quantity is explained about the unit of each items. The profit unit is defined the of each item's profit. Next we go to the transactions. First we click the transaction input item set. Here given the transaction ID S0, S1, these column tables. Here the TID is mentioned the transaction ID. S0, S1, S2 is defined the items. The 0 and 1s are items occurs in each transactions. The 0 is defined that the items are not purchased in each time this transaction. The 1 is the number of transactions, the items in this current transactions. Next go to find the absolute utility of items transactions. Click the find absolute utility buttons. Then we show the sample calculations on how to calculate the absolute utility from these transactions. Tier 1, now we calculate the Tier 1 calculation data. The TID is the first transactions. The item ID is declared in this first transaction. S0, S1, S2, S3. So in this 5-6 items are purchased in first transactions. The item set quantity is the item S0 is purchased in 10 kgs in this first transaction, and the profit unit is transactions S0's profit unit. So we calculate the absolute utility from item quantity and profit unit, multiply the profit unit. So we get the absolute utility 10 because the S0's profit unit is 2 and the purchased quantity is 10. So we get the absolute utility from the multiply of the items at quantity and profit unit, the value of 20. So following this calculations formula using this absolute utility is equal to external utility and internal utility. So here the external utility is considered as a items at quantity and the internal utility is considered the profit unit. So multiply of these utilities we get the absolute utility. Next we go to the transaction items at absolute utility values. Here we click the button. We can show the transactions absolute utility value all these transactions. Here the 20 is the absolute utility of transactions. 6. So all these values are mentioned in absolute utility of all these transactions. After find the absolute utility, we go to the transaction utility of all the transactions. So we click this button. It shows the calculations part of how to calculate the transaction utility from absolute utility. So we click here and shows calculation done, utility calculation details. Here the transaction utility is derived from the sum of the absolute utility values. So last transaction we show the all the item sets of absolute utility. So we have to get the transaction utility from each transaction. We add the each absolute utilities in each transactions. So DID is the transaction 1, mention is transaction 1, what transaction is occur here. The item set define the absolute utility of S0, S1, S2. So we have to sum out these utilities values, then we have to find the transaction utility. So the first transaction utility is 73. Here the data validation is analyze all the transaction utility process. So here the number of transactions in occur the transaction utility is 34. Next we find the transaction utility of all the transactions. The TID is the transaction ID and TU is declare the transaction utility of all the transactions. So here the TR1 is the transaction ID and 28 is the profit unit of first transactions. So the TR1's transaction utility is 28. So next we have to find the high utility item set. So the find high utility items and transactions is classify the transaction utility. Here shows the high transaction utility item set because the minimum threshold of transaction utility, if we consider 50, the classification of utility mining is find out the high utility items. That means the utility is classify the transaction utility. So the 70, 64, 62 is the profit unit of each transactions. So these are 5 transactions is the high utility transactions from the transaction utility. Next we go to calculate the transaction weighted utility. Here we select the any 2 transaction details randomly. TR50 and TR9 is the transaction ID. So we have to select any 2 items from the high utility items of transactions. Then find the high transaction weighted utilities. So the TR50 and TR9 is the high transaction weighted item utility. Then we have to find the closed item set from the transactions. The S0, S4 is the closed item set from the high utility item set transactions. So the S0 is the closest item set from the transactions. Next we go to the complete close high utility item set from transaction weighted utility item set. So these are the complete set of the closed item set from the database transactions. So the transaction weighted item of each item transactions. So the transaction weighted items of each transaction 39065. So transaction weighted utility. Next we go to the final results of this transactions mining utility is, so the S0 items profit unit is 390. So these are the promising item. The unpromising item is S1 because of the transaction utility is 27 is the very lowest level of profit unit. So we have considered this S1 item is unpromising item and the S0 is the promising item. So the minimum utility item set from the transaction is transaction 27 is the minimum utility item set. The maximum utility is transaction 4. So we have to find the utility items from the transaction using this way. Thank you.